our speakers this evening, starting off with Dennis. Dennis is talking a lot about sort of the systems and the processes that are important today in underpinning a digital business. And quite frankly, all of our businesses now, even if we are dealing with people, are about having good digital platforms that allow us to operate efficiently and, most importantly, have the time for dealing with our customers.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. As Mark said, my name's Dennis, and we run a small IT company that basically deals with companies in all sorts of areas, but all the issues we're talking about tonight are really pretty generic. You guys are in a situation where things are changing, and so you're going to be facing some of these issues possibly for the first time, but a lot of them are the similar issues that any small company is starting up, trying to establish themselves with some facilities, some infrastructure, things that you might have been previously getting from your involvement with the larger groups, you might have to start thinking about by yourself. So the thing that struck me first when we started talking about the whole idea of digital businesses with travel agents was the issue of technology and travel, and that led me to think about this, which is probably the most famous travel technology you can think of, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't worry, don't panic. And I think that's just a general good rule to live by, I think, in life, a fact of life. Everyone has to deal with IT for all their core business functions pretty much. And the sort of things you have to think about are the core line of business applications that you have to run just to conduct your business. You have to think about your communication infrastructure. All of that generally these days tends to be based around IT. There may be databases of information that you're dealing with every day that you have to have access to. And something that a lot of people, I find, don't think about, often until it's too late, is backup and disaster recovery. Your business systems are going to be everything from really basic file management, so you're going to have files that you just have to deal with. There are going to be documents, there's going to be brochures, there's going to be all sorts of things that may be sitting in systems that you currently don't have complete control of. You're going to have to be able to bring those sort of things in-house and deal with them yourself and make sure that you've got access to all that information in a structured way. Accounting, obviously, if anybody was at the previous workshops, that would have been touched on, I'm sure. For all you know, all your invoicing might be currently sitting in systems that you don't have control of. How are you going to start doing your own invoicing and dealing with just basic business practices of getting your invoices out there and getting them paid. And client relationship management is something that a lot of companies, and our company was guilty of this until relatively recently, often don't think about that much. And having a structured system that lets you actually bring all the information about your interactions with a client over a period of time is an incredibly powerful tool. You often have these things sitting in a whole bunch of different places, and you think, I've got all that information, but to pull it into one system makes it vastly more accessible, and it changes, I can say from personal experience, it changes enormously how useful that information becomes, because you can suddenly go in there and look at a single place that gives you a complete history of your interactions with a client. Communication is something that is inherent in every single business these days, and a very relationship-driven business like travel agencies, even more so. You're spending all your time communicating to people, basically. And the IT aspects of that these days are extremely ubiquitous. Just about everything is IT-based. Obviously, there's email. Everyone's dealing with email all the time. And email often is just about the entire business for some people. I've seen companies that their file system, their CRM, everything is effectively just their email system. Everything's filed away in folders in their email. They've got gigabytes and gigabytes of it, and that's their entire IT infrastructure is their email system. And often it's not backed up. But you've also got less obvious things like chat, video conferencing. Maybe you've got online 24/7 help desk kind of facilities that people can click onto and get help. So all those things are going to require internet infrastructure that you might have to start thinking about how you're going to provide. Phones don't seem like an IT thing, obviously, necessarily, but these days an awful lot of phones are what they call VoIP phones, which are basically telephony over the internet. And something that people possibly don't think too much about when it comes to the technology sides of their business is their online digital identity and their branding, their marketing identity, if you like. Your ownership of your domain name, if you have one, is something that you've got to make sure you've got control of. A lot of people might have email addresses that are joeblogs@gmail.com. It works, you'll get emails. It doesn't look that great a lot of the time for people. And so if you're trying to establish yourself as an independent agent and you've got a particular brand that you're trying to establish and promote, You've got to make sure that you've got the coverage for your domain names and every other part of the digital identity that you might want to project to people. Business intelligence is something that could flow out of that sort of information. If you've got a large company that's been dealing with your client base over the years, there could be all sorts of survey information about demographics, purchasing history, buying trends, all that sort of thing. They could be gathering over a large number of years for all your client base. You might have access to none of that anymore. So how do you get that sort of information and bring it into your own agency and be able to build off of that history that you've basically established through your own business over a period of years? The first time a lot of companies think about backup and disaster recovery would be kind of day one after this. But this kind of major disruption to your ability to do business is something that you really do have to plan for. It doesn't take anything anywhere near as extreme as this for you to have a way of recovering your business and continuing to operate while you establish whatever facilities you've lost. And this could be as simple as a power outage for a couple of days. There's been a flood and it's taken them 2 days to get your power back to the office, or you can't get into the building because there's some kind of health hazard, something like that. And as a result, what do you do for 2 days? Can you operate at all? Or is your business just stagnant for that time? It can simply be, your computer is broken and it's not under warranty, therefore you've got to wait and get another computer from somewhere. It takes a week, get it set up and everything else. In the meantime, what are you doing? So just after this sort of event is not the time to think about that. You really need to think about it from the start. And backup and disaster recovery are obviously interrelated, but they're not the same thing particularly. Like, backup is more about where's that file gone. You go in there and all of a sudden this file I had this morning has disappeared somewhere. Someone's deleted it accidentally or whatever. And so you have a backup scheme in place. So you can go back to your backups and you can find that file. But it's a very individual thing, how much you want to spend, and it's a risk equation you've got to balance. How much risk and cost you're prepared to put into these sorts of things. And that comes down to the basic question of your business continuity, of how much it costs you to not be operating for any given period of time, and how much are you prepared to spend to avoid being down for longer than X amount of time. So yes, comes down to the crux of it. That's all great, but how the hell do you do that? When it comes to setting up infrastructure, there's 3 basic ways you can do it. The cloud obviously is extremely topical at the moment. Everyone would have heard about cloud this and cloud that. There's a big push for people to move into the cloud, and you'll often see that referred to as other things like software as a service, hardware as a service, infrastructure as a service. They're all basically talking about similar things, which is all the systems and things that you need to operate are sitting on someone else's computer. Well, the cloud is basically, it's just a buzzword for the internet, really. And I'm not even sure who coined this, but it's actually a very inappropriate term, but it's used everywhere, so I'll stick with it. And you can have almost everything sitting in the cloud if you want to. You can have your software systems, your servers, everything that you would use in a normal office computer environment, other than your actual workstation, though to some extent that can also be there. They'll all be sitting on somebody else's server, and so it could quickly get to be quite expensive. And certainly in our experience dealing with companies over a range of sizes, at the small end of things particularly, who may not be wanting to churn over their computers every 3 years and replace hardware on that sort of schedule, the cost of doing things in the cloud can very quickly get to the same sort of point of running your own systems. If you are replacing them every 3 years, then it's an easier equation because you've got a straightforward depreciation of the equipment over time that you can compare it to. But a lot of small companies won't do that and don't need to do that. So it's not something you can kind of in any way put a table up and say this is how much it's going to cost you to do this, because it's extremely customised, basically. And you can do almost everything. There are great systems out there, but they all cost. It's not to be underestimated that the amount of benefit you can potentially get, particularly in a small business, by being able to set these sort of things up very quickly and easily. People tend to think of in-house systems as a bit old-fashioned now because the cloud is so kind of topical. They progressed a little bit from this now. That was probably just a tea maker or something, I don't know. But there are still some significant benefits in having your systems in-house. The key thing, particularly for a small business, is it gives you complete control. One of the issues that was raised in relation to the travel industry particularly is the fact that a lot of people are using Google Mail for stuff in the travel industry. Google is effectively setting itself up as a competitor in the travel industry. Every one of your emails for your travel business, if you're using them, is going through them. Google's model is to basically scan every piece of information that passes through their networks and pull information out of it. Don't, though, think that email is ever secure, by the way. There's something that I've spent a lot of time over 16 years telling people. Think of email as a postcard. Don't think of it as a sealed letter. It can be read by anybody if they choose to. And as I mentioned before, you can sometimes have a situation where the best option is to have a mixed environment where some of the stuff is sitting in the cloud. You might have your email and your Office applications, for instance, sitting out in the cloud, and because that works well for you, interacting with people that are sharing this stuff a lot. But all your databases and your CRM and all that kind of stuff might be sitting on your own servers because you want to keep tighter control of that, or it's simply more cost effective for you to run some system in-house than it is to pay to have that sort of stuff on a cloud system somewhere. That's really the basic gist of what I wanted to talk about. It's really the things to take away from this, I think, are that you need to think about what you're going to need when you're in an environment where you're basically having to fend for yourself with a lot of these systems. Then how do I go about getting those systems to meet that particular need? And then critically, how do I keep those systems if disaster strikes or other nasty events come along that prevent you from operating? That's kind of the takeaway message that most people I would hope would be thinking about after this, though I do find that most of them end up going away thinking about that. And that's really the basis of all of that. Thank you.